Peter Dutton is speaking on this very matter. He's at the Gold Coast and he's speaking at the moment at a news conference. This is, of course, the scene of Fadden, where we're going to see this by-election held in July. Let's have a listen in.
It gives rise to a by-election.
Just on the Voice, Indigenous leaders are urging Australians to honour the Uluru Statement on the 6th anniversary. What will voting no say to those who believe this is the best chance to advance equality for them?
Well, the Coalition strongly believes in constitutional recognition for Indigenous Australians, and we believe there's bipartisan support, and I think that's the next natural step for the Prime Minister to take. I think the Voice is an overreach, and I don't think the Australian public is there in supporting it, and I think the Australian public is puzzled as to why the Voice is not designed until after the vote takes place. I think most Australians would say, well, just let me be informed and I'll make up my own mind about whether I'm voting yes or no. But the situation the Prime Minister is proposing at the moment is that you'll have a Canberra Voice that is going to, I think, not address the problems of Indigenous Australians, particularly in remote and regional areas, which is the most important thing that we should apply ourselves to. It's going to apply to every element of government decision-making, including by the executive. And the Prime Minister is saying to Australians, just vote for this on the vibe. And I don't think you can do that. It's without precedent. There's been no constitutional convention so that people can have the arguments on both sides and try and find a position of consensus. I think the Prime Minister sees a political wedge in this, and I think playing politics in this area of public policy, as the Prime Minister is doing, is not in our country's best interest. He's presiding over a process at the moment which is dividing Australians, not uniting Australians. Our proposal is that we have constitutional recognition and that we have a local and regional voice in legislation. That way there won't be overreach. That way you can modify the legislation to make sure it's effective and delivering the practical outcomes. Don't forget that you can't out, I'll put it this way, you can't out-legislate. That's exactly the word I was looking for. Thank you, Angie. You can't out-legislate the Constitution. And I think it's very dangerous that unless you've got a tight form of words and you can implement that with certainty, I think you'd want to think very carefully about voting for the Prime Minister's Canberra Voice, because I don't think it's going to deliver the practical outcomes, tragically, for people on the ground in places like Alice Springs.
The PM's accused you of amplifying misinformation around the Voice. Are you resorting to a fear campaign?
Well, not at all. And I just think people like, with respect, people like Noel Pearson, Megan Davis, Linda Burney, Anthony Albanese, shouting at Australians, telling them that because they don't support the Voice that somehow they're racist or they're not interested in supporting Indigenous Australians, it's counterproductive and it's disingenuous and it's dishonest. I think we have an obligation as a country, given that the Constitution is our nation's rule book, to understand what is happening. When the Constitution was put together in 1901, there was a double test there. It wasn't to be changed. You can't change the Constitution unless you have a majority of Australians who vote for it and a majority of states. So it's a double test. It's way beyond what you would normally do when you go to vote at a general election. And that gives you an indication that you don't change it lightly. And Australians, over the course of the last few decades, have supported very few constitutional changes because we live in the best country in the world. We've got a strong system of democracy, and we shouldn't seek to change it unless we know that it's going to be for the better.